Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your technology, media-related questions for about production every single day. Cindy Drozda from Erie, Colorado was our reader today. Cindy, what's our first question?
Our first one is from Lois Richter in Davis, California, U.S. I just got a message saying my domain, BirdingWithLois.global, is at risk of being hijacked. Risks? How can I protect myself? This company says it can, quote, block unauthorized actions on your domain, end quote. Real?
Courtney Gooden's going to start shopping and give us some help. How, Courtney?
Well, one thing, Lois, is make sure this isn't a phishing scam, because I receive these kind of emails every day that say, your Visa account has been compromised. Just click here and we'll reset your passwords, or something other than the real company is emailing you. Make sure that message is coming from your ISP or your host of your website. And to do that, log into the host of your website directly, not using any links in any emails that you received. And, one thing you can do to protect yourself is change your administrator password on your websites, the company that's hosting your website, so that nobody, if your password has been compromised, put a strong password in for that. Make sure you write it down or remember it, or have a password manager that manages it somewhere. And that is how they can get in to change your the contents of your web page. So with the administrator password for your website, change that password.
Jason Beish.
Yeah, Lois, 99 out of 100 times this is a scam, and it is usually just phishing. I'm going to call your attention to ICANN, and I did a who is on your domain. This is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And it says under domain status, the client transfer is prohibited. It looks like you're registered and you have very recently logged in, and all of this looks okay. So I'm hard pressed to say for sure that you've got nothing going on, but almost never will a domain name registrar reach out to you saying your domain could be hijacked. I would also add two-factor authentication, with kind of an ephemeral number sweep, and I would add that to my login just to be sure.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, you definitely shouldn't. Whoever sent you that email, don't respond. And so you should have two-factor authentication from your web provider, whoever's providing your, which is what Jason showed you there. I highly recommend Hover. It is, in my opinion, it's where I keep all my stuff there now, and I really think that it's a great service. And I really dislike a lot of the other ones. So, in a really strong way, I dislike almost all the other ones. And so, but you should pay attention to it, and you should be careful with it. People can't take it, but absolutely anybody who tells you anybody that just randomly picks you out and says you owe them fast track, you owe them taxes, you owe them all these things could be compromised. They're probably there to compromise you. So don't respond. Don't respond. Don't do anything. Just throw it away.
I'll keep you safe by stealing your money.
Oh my gosh.
Next question.
Coming in through the QR code from Jason Robert Shaw in Sarasota, Florida. What small, useful gadgets do you keep in your AV toolbox? I was trying to route HDMI from a Mac Mini M4 through a Feelworld monitor and into an Obsbot Talent, but getting nothing on the Obsbot. The fix turned out to be a cheap EDID emulator.
Jason Beish will help you out here, Jason.
Yeah, I think I have that same Feelworld monitor, and run into that too. As a rule, the cheaper the monitor or the codec, the lesser the chance that this is going to be, that every piece of the information, including the metadata, is going to be passed perfectly through. I've had relatively good luck with the Blackmagic codecs, the Blackmagic video assists, but I know others who haven't. As far as things that I include always in my Crikey kit, it's almost always a series of patch cables. I have a tiny little keyboard and mouse that is a single unit that is Bluetooth enabled and also has the little chiclet for USB that will allow me to very quickly tap into any system and very quickly make use of it. I have a number of OWC kind of gadgets and gizmos that allow me to get any port that I need pretty much from anywhere to anywhere. And I have a Cable Scout that will very quickly check and test the pinouts of Ethernet cables, and allow me to kind of numerically assign and then push a little burst of data and make sure that I'm getting a clean signal through the Ethernet itself. Alex
Lindsay.
Yeah, I have the two big things that I always feel like I need is some kind of box. So there's a variety of them that are audio boxes that I can kind of plug I can plug audio signals in. I can see that if they're working, if they're not working, and it has to have a speaker, has to be able to generate a tone. So those things are useful for me. Other things that I tend to have with me is a small monitor. So the monitor, so that I can just plug stuff in and say, hey, am I getting signal? That monitor should be able to see channels. So I want to be able to see like how many channels I have and where they are and so on and so forth. Those are two big things. Tons and tons of format swaps and like little cables that are going to let me go from female to male and male to female and to do all these other things that I might need to connect through it. So I have usually little bags of those. And then I also carry a lot of screws around of different sizes, mostly 1/4-20 and 3/8. Mostly because, trying to attach something, I've got lots of little cheese plates and lots of little screws and ones with little with spacers on them so they go deep, and some of them that are just the regular sized ones for tripods. So just lots of little things like that, and usually a bag of those. We call them crikey bags, and they start off as little bags, and by the time you have a big show, they might be a road case full of just what we call crikey, which is just you're not allowed to have anything there that you expect to use. Those are all things that you don't expect to need.
Courtney Gooden.
Well, of course, for video, the primary thing to always have in your case is the old decimator MDHX, which is only $300. Not only does it convert, it can convert SDI to HDMI and HDMI to SDI and HDMI to HDMI, but it can also work as a distribution amplifier. So you can take one input and go to 4 outputs of HDSDI. It has the little LCD screen there on it that tells you what type of signal it's getting in. Tells you, what the frame rate is, whether it's PSF, or I, and it convert between almost any high def and standard def resolution to any other resolution and any other frame rate. I also carry, there's a Viltrox, like Alex said, a small monitor that has HDMI inputs. It has scopes in it. So it can, and it's battery powered. So you can, has the battery connections on the back for the type Sony and type cells, which it comes with. So you can just stick it in somewhere and plug a signal into it and check it and check the scopes and check signal compatibility. And that EDID monitor and emulator does something similar to what the MDHX does. Is it can look at that EDID and either ignore it or generate whatever type of EDID out, as whatever signal you tell it to output. So it can solve those problems as well.
Jason Bache, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah. Also, as my rigs have included and become more dependent upon Ethernet for various things, not the least of which is Dante, I find that it's very handy to have about a half dozen to a dozen of these, and it is amazing how much that and kind of a combiner that will allow me to get another 6 inches off of a lead. Can be. I also find that these are very handy. They're about $100 from OWC. Thunderbolt 3 to dual HDMI out can be very handy, and it's cross-platform and driverless.
Yeah, Jason, the only comment I'd have is you said toolbox, and I think there needs to be an S on the end of that, because I think most of us who've been in business for a long time don't have just one toolbox. We probably have a video toolbox, an audio toolbox, an IT toolbox, a grip toolbox of some sort that has grip adapters. I mean, the production environment is a fragile, constantly changing and, built, tear down thing. And the number of times you run into different location issues that you have to solve, that's why you end up with all of these problem solvers. And I think Alex is 100% right. The job that works best is where you don't open any of these, because you planned exactly what you needed for the shoot and you had everything you needed and you left without having to go into these. those are rare shoots in my experience. Most of the time I found myself, oh gosh, your house thing has a female there and I was expecting a male. I need a gender changer on that cable. And you go to your audio or your video box and you get that and you proceed along and you get your job done. So good luck in building your kits. Next question.
Jason Robert Shaw Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana is asking, as a follow-up to broadcast versus streaming, is video on demand with or without ads now the preferred way to watch content, or does the USA still love watching Jeopardy together coast to coast?
Nigel, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it does depend on the programs. Obviously, sport is the last, I think, holdout for cable television and live programming. Most of us who watch everything else watch stream. I've just moved city to city, just plugged in my Apple TV, and everything worked fine, other than having to deal with a cable provider for the internet, which is a nightmare. So I suspect for most of us, particularly people who are on the road, particularly people who don't like adverts, streaming is the answer. I don't know anybody, maybe I'll be proved wrong, who makes appointment television to watch quiz shows. I do know a lot of people who stream them.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, my wife and daughter love Jeopardy, so they watch it all the time. I've never seen them watch it in real time, though. I don't think once you get used to not having ads, it's pretty hard to go back. And this is really a problem for terrestrial TV is because you get used to not having the ads, and then you go to them and you're like, these interruptions are just unworkable for you. It just feels like a huge, once you're out of that, once the spell has been broken of that process and you're out of that habit, it's just impossible to go back. And so I think that's part of what's kind of eating up the market. There's definitely a generation that's still watching TV, but I think that generation keeps on getting older. The almost everyone, I would say at this point, under 50 is really not watching a lot of regular TV.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, now there's even these days with more and more people using over-the-top stuff to watch live TV, like YouTube TV is what Alex and I have for viewing our live TV, as well as all of what normally would be cable TV and live TV programming. It's not real time either. It's YouTube, so it's delayed about 30 seconds away from live TV. And there's a curious phenomenon I've noticed now that, it used to be, when you're watching the Super Bowl or some big sporting event and you're close to your neighbors, when somebody scores a goal, you'd hear cheers come out from your neighbors' windows, because they're having a Super Bowl party. And if you're watching over terrestrial broadcast, you hear the cheers come out right when the goal is made. If you're watching over YouTube TV or Hulu or some other live streaming service to get your sports or ESPN, you'll see the goal and cheer, and then about 30, 45 seconds, a sudden cheer will go up from the neighbors. And so you can use that delay to detect how they're watching their live sports.
Alex?
What's funny is that when FIFA when they were playing in Brazil, for the World Cup, the funny thing is that we would have different people watching different streaming services, and it was all slightly different. So you'd hear the cheers appear in a certain order, but it'd be like yeah, and they were all like a couple seconds apart. I have to admit that even with sports, I watch. I watch sports. Like a football game. I'll wait 20 minutes. To 30 minutes so that I can skip the ads as I go through. So by the end of a football game, I'm usually caught up. But during the actual game, I'm slowly catching up for the first half and slowly catching up for the second half because I can't watch the ads. I watched the ads for the Super Bowl and I thought this is the longest. I just didn't register how long a football game feels when there's ads.
I wonder if that was part of, I heard a bunch of stuff about the Academy Awards broadcast last night, and a lot of people were saying that from the people who were watching on Hulu or something like that, the show cut off early. And it caused me to wonder if somebody was watching the real-time broadcast and didn't realize there was, a 20 or 40-second delay in their feed of that, and had said, okay, the show's over, we can stop the feed, yet they lost the last part of the Best Picture.
I have to admit that that probably was a glitch or something. It doesn't sound like that they would do that. But I know for us, we don't stop that feed. We look at the stream and we don't stop the feed until we see a black frame,
Right.
You know, like it's just wait, and nobody moves. No, we're not done until we stop the encoders. Until the encoders get turned off, everybody just stays in their seat.
Courtney, you had a thought about that?
Yeah, last night watching the Academy Awards too, I had it. I was preparing dinner, and so I had it on in my kitchen, which receives a live broadcast from ABC over the air, and in the room, I have it the DVR checked on YouTube TV, so it's recording it. But several people, since it's a live broadcast, and it went a half hour over its scheduled time period. And so what people ran into is they set their DVR just to, record the Oscars. And if you don't check that little box that says, record extra, this is a live show, maybe add in a half hour to the end of it, it'll cut off at the time it was scheduled to be finished. And a lot of people were complaining this morning that they missed the best actor, best actress, and best picture because it cut off right at 7 o'clock. And, we missed the last, the biggest 3 awards of the evening were missed because the DVR said, it's supposed to be over. Stop.
Yeah, well, I'll stop. It's the top of the hour. Alex?
Yeah, it's the best part of YouTube TV is the records. You just tag it. Like, tag this. Rarely do you get cut off by accident. And especially for someone like me that doesn't really want to watch all the Oscars, I just want to see what the graphics look like and what the stage looked like, which, by the way, the best Oscars ever. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, just an amazing design. Like, it's definitely worth, we'll talk about it tomorrow, but I'm going to pull some frames for tomorrow's show. It's just stunning design.
Cool.
But that's all I watch it for. Like, skip. You're like, okay, I understand now, and then I leave.
There were some speeches that went significantly over. We were paying partial attention to it. Anyway, tomorrow, that gives you an emphasis on the tuning tomorrow if you're a graphics geek. Next question.
From Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I bought a couple HomePod minis just for use around the house. Any fun tips or tricks to know?
Jason Bache is going to give you some thoughts. Jason?
Sure. If you have an Apple TV, be sure it's connected with Ethernet. Be sure it is up to date. And when you add the HomePods, add them all at the same time, one at a time, name them individually, and once they're all in there, then go into Home and update.
Oh, there you go. That's some tips that look like it'll really help. Next question.
Next one is from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. What's your approach to mentorship, and how has it influenced your own growth?
Nigel DeSalle, start us off.
I think we did a show on this a couple of years ago, so I'll try and sort of quickly summarize some of the key learnings. First of all, we all have mentors, I hope, and are mentoring other people, so you should have both. Second of all, the relationship is managed by the mentee, not the mentor. That good mentor relationships, your mentee is the one that drives it. If you are driving the mentee, then the relationship's wrong. Try and pick mentors, multiple mentors, but try and pick them for skills or areas you want to grow. There's sort of no point in having a mentor that's exactly the same as you. You're trying to fill in the gaps. My last thought for you is, I think people confuse mentors and coaches. Coaches running up and down the sideline shouting instructions and calling the plays. I don't think that's what a good mentor does. A good mentor is a sounding board who you can ask questions to, and they will ask questions of you. And when I mentor people and they say, what would I do here? First of all, I try not to answer that question. But when I do answer that question, I always say, this is what I would do. I'm not saying it would work for you because I'm not in your situation. What we're here to do is discuss and really think round the problem and through the problem, not coach you on what to call.
Perfect advice. Courtney Gooden, thoughts?
Yeah, Paul, these days there's two types of mentors. What with, YouTube and streaming, there's the people you follow on YouTube, and there are a lot of great mentors out there. Curtis Judd for audio, and, there's people who review video and give you tips on video as well. If you follow them, you can pick up a lot of good tips on how to use a certain piece of equipment or how to do a certain type of job. That's great. You can gain knowledge that way. But an in-person mentorship creates a couple of other, besides the gaining of knowledge, has another meaning. It's two-way. And not only are you learning from your mentor on the set or on location or whatever your job is as an intern, you're gaining knowledge, and you're also gaining the trust of your mentor. So that as that mentor brings you along and sees that you're absorbing a lot of his or her methods and instructions on how to do that particular job, they trust you, and then you have, down the line, you'll have referrals. You can have referrals from that mentor. And so not only do you gain the knowledge, but you gain a foothold into whatever industry you're trying to get into. And if they can give you a referral, if they can refer a job that they can't do to one of their mentees, that is a great way to get your foot in the door and get started in a business that is very hard to get into.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, I mean, if there's someone in front of you, you want to help them. If someone behind you, you want to help them. You don't know when that's going to be, and what you're looking for in general are, fast-moving objects. Look for motion, people who are moving forward. It doesn't matter whether they're behind or in front of you, and you want to help them. And so there's a lot of folks that'll be on a team that aren't, when you get good at it, they're not really going anywhere. They're just doing their thing, and that's fine. But the ones you really want to pay attention to, or the ones that, and you always want to pay, you always want to do your job and pay attention to everybody to some degree. But the ones you want to be looking for opportunities to help, either behind or looking opportunities to help in front of you. Because I look at helping somebody as the way to be mentored. So they're ahead of me, like the way I would work with Leo, for instance, who I would consider a mentor of mine, is that I just started showing up. And I watch him carefully. I watch what he's doing. I'm one of the people that participates in his shows, but I've been participating in Leo's shows for now over 20 years, and learned a lot about broadcast doing that. But I'm not really having sessions with him where he's giving me advice. He's mostly just, there and giving me feedback on doing his thing. And then I'm learning by being next to him. And I think that you always want to try to find as many opportunities you can to do that and give other people opportunities to do that with what you're doing and especially I look at volunteer projects and free projects and test projects as a way often to bring a bunch of people in that I haven't worked with before so that they can learn something. I oftentimes can do a job bigger than my own. Oftentimes I bring people in that know more than I do about their specific thing to play along. And so I learn something as well. So it's all collaborative.
Great question, Paul. And don't forget, this entire show is run by your questions and your votes on those questions. You can use our Makana system. It's a Q&A system that almost anybody who's involved in the show, you can just go to the website at officehours.global/join, and we'll send you an email within a day or two and fill that out. You can get into the system. Once you do that, again, as I mentioned, you can not only put your questions in, but you can vote on everyone's questions should you choose to during the show. And those votes are very important because that's how we determine what gets the most priority and what we spend the most time discussing in the show. So officehours.global/join. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana is asking, what are your thoughts on meetings where new managers do not turn on their cameras during meetings and remain anonymous to employees?
Nigel's going to start us off. Nigel?
I think the way the question's framed is the answer is I don't like that. Because new managers shouldn't be doing any of that thing. I think a lot of this is down to the culture of the company and the culture of the meetings in the company, and particularly how the most senior leadership respond. When I tend to do things like that, I make sure I always leave my camera on, and I encourage the leadership team to do the same, and I encourage them to encourage their leadership teams to do the same. I think you can say, hey, everybody, please turn on your camera. But what's interesting, even with Zoom, is lots of people actually don't know how to use the product and actually can't see all the people. And if it's a huge meeting, that may be even worse. They just don't know how to get the different displays up. So it's really about leadership. It's about how you respond, how you get your team to respond. But I would encourage everybody, leaderships, you want to show that you are engaged and listening, and you want your management team to do the same.
Alex Lindsay.
When a manager doesn't turn their camera on, they're ceding control to the other folks that are there. Like they're ceding impact. If you have a good setup, I mean, if you have a bad setup, maybe not, but if you have a good setup, and all managers should have a good setup. We worked with companies that in 2020, when things hit, they spent $5,000 per manager to make sure that they looked and sounded good, because they knew that it was important to make sure that not all companies did that, and I think they paid a heavy price for it. I think that's one of the reasons that they're not a lot of management and a lot of the companies aren't seen as important is because they looked really bad on Zoom. And I think people don't like looking bad, don't like not being good at something. And so they find Zoom to be very stressful. I do think that in the future, you want your managers, especially, and your C-level leadership and so on and so forth, to look good all the time, and be engaged with everybody all the time. But when you're not showing up, when you look bad as a manager on these meetings, you're giving a lot of impact away to the employees that are looking good, are putting some effort into it. It's an easy way to move up the ladder. I've seen it now over the last 5 years of lots of different people who you can see that they play really hard related to their, just their personal setup. And you watch them move through the thing because they're in all these online meetings and they make everybody else look small, and so, so it's an important thing. I think managers ignore their presence on these at their peril.
Courtney Gooden.
And there's also legal reasons for some of this. During the pandemic, I'm a member of couple of unions, and they all required changes to their constitution and bylaws to allow hybrid meetings, where normally our membership meetings, our board meetings, those kinds of things where you actually vote on things to amend things and do contracts and sign contracts. Those things require a certain democratic vote. And you have to, our union instituted strict rules once they adopted the ability to do a hybrid meeting where some people are coming in remotely and some people are actually attending the meeting in person, because they require a quorum and they require votes. So you have to not only have your name, and there are requirements that you have to have your camera on, you have to have headphones or an earpiece so that the audio cannot be heard by anyone standing near you. You cannot do it in a public place. Those kind of rules were implemented to make sure that you met all the legal ramifications of we had a quorum and we voted on this and the majority ruled. They don't allow for any anonymous attendees to vote or even attend the meeting, to monitor the meeting without careful validation of their credentials, including a live camera. You have to have your camera on when attending a meeting and not turn it off.
Next question.
Kent in Madison, Ohio is asking through the QR code. I know I keep asking questions about Opus.pro. Does anyone have a good workflow to bring shorts and reels into YouTube or Instagram and get a good static thumbnail? Or do I need to manually jump from platform to platform right now? Thanks.
I know Alex has been exploring this. Alex, what do you think?
We'll continue to talk to it. I will say that it's easy to make content or it's easy to watch content. It's hard to do both, and so you really want to think about, if you are not willing to go from frame to frame, to make the frames look just the way you want them to, I would recommend uploading those static slates yourself. We're playing with Opus right now. One thing I will say is that and you're seeing shorts that we're producing right now. One thing that we're going to start testing is we're not sure that we're getting the same quality if we completely use it encased, as opposed to downloading, re-uploading, and so on and so forth. So there might even be more work to squeeze the most out of it possible. It is a very powerful tool that we really enjoy using to kind of grab onto snippets, but we're still working on the best workflow to get the highest quality out of it.
Next question.
Our next one's from Todd Reynolds in North Adams, Massachusetts, USA. I have been told that Meyer Technology eschews Dante in favor of AVB. Can the panel explain why this might be the case? A Google search reveals something about lower-level network traffic, but would like to hear more.
Alex is going to help you out. Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, you might get a more detailed answer from on Wednesday. Wednesday is our audio day, and you have a lot of some pretty deep audio experts there on Wednesday to answer those questions. Mickey put into the chat, AVB is actually a standard and natively supported by many more manufacturers of live sound equipment. And these are, there are, and specifically the ones that are that the most prominent ones that cover it are like Meyer Sound, L Acoustics, Biamp, Avid, Harman. So those are the ones that are kind of paying attention to this and building that into their hardware. Dante is proprietary and often requires after sales upgrades, with the exception of Yamaha. But it said he does point out AVB is still he says AVB is still uncompressed PCM. So, but I think that it's it's easier for them to work within that standard-based system. For them, if you're, I would say, heavy lifting, Dante is there's a lot of folks, and they need a more flexible schedule, more flexible connections, and a lot more connections with pieces of hardware that don't necessarily support audio, video, bridge. So I think that's the difference. But these bigger companies, again, like Meyer Sound and L Acoustics and Avid and Harman are the bigger, heavier lifting is something that they'd rather have a standards-based platform to work with.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana asked the panel, is the Kentucky soundstage more hype than real hope? Everyone thinks they can make films. Link provided.
Courtney Gooden's got to start us off here. Courtney?
Well, I've seen this over and over and over again, and now it's getting serious. What happens is that these companies build these sound stages in hopes of bringing Hollywood movies there. The one that they picture here doesn't look any different than any of the warehouses converted to sound stages that you'll find in Hollywood, because even in Hollywood, there were a lot of these that were created during stage shortages when production was rampant in Hollywood. There were a lot of big, Roseanne, Alf, a lot of those TV shows were just made in warehouses that weren't even very well treated for sound. It was pretty difficult to get good sound in these warehouses because we ran out of stage space. So stage space isn't the only reason to attract production to your particular city. And one thing is, if it's investment and they convert the space, since it's designed strictly for filmmaking, they may have a pretty big investment that they're going to have to amortize. So they're going to have to do something else to attract that production to your state or your city. And that means tax incentives. And if your state does not have a lot of tax incentives, the pictures won't come there, as evidenced by Hollywood's dearth of production now, because our tax incentives have run out, and there are several other states that are offering higher tax incentives, and the producers just run away for the bribes and the tax incentives in the other states. So that is what attracts production there. It's nice if they have infrastructure there already, stages built. Atlanta has built up their infrastructure a great deal with Tyler Perry's stages and a number of other companies building sound stages there to accommodate the fact. But if those tax incentives disappear, this happened in North Carolina, it's happened in North Texas, it's happened in a number of other states. Once the tax incentives disappear, the production goes away. And now you're stuck with that big white elephant of a production stage with nobody to man it and nobody to create anything in it. So it's an advantage. How much of an attraction it is debatable.
Yeah, ever since we did Cinegear, we covered Cinegear a couple of years ago, and we were on the off the Paramount lot, and those stages where they had shot Star Trek and things like that, you realized what big infrastructure and how much it cost to make those sound stages. I mean, these are huge buildings. They are the entire interior surface is treated for sound. Even then, with all of that infrastructure, I mean, I can't imagine the cost of running them. Now, in the old model, where a long-running show like Star Trek or a big Hollywood movie could rake in millions, and that still happens, but I don't see the communities forming around that kind of thing, particularly when things like The Volume is making digital recreation of large spaces more and more affordable and easier. There are more of those going in, and those hard costs of a big facility in somewhere where there's not already a naturally evolving community of professionals. And I think that's the circumstance Tyler Perry is in. He's done so well that he was able to gather that in Atlanta. It really is hard for a non-production history state to suddenly say, I'm just going to build this big thing and they will come to me. Generally, I don't see that happening all that much anymore, but we'll see over the course of time. So I don't know. Keep us up to date, Roscoe, on how Kentucky manages as it goes forward. We'll all be very interested in that. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York is up next. Is anyone affected by Skype shutting down?
Jason Bache, is it bothering you at all?
No, but it's because I've just moved on. I used Skype for many, many, many years and found it to be just a wonderful thing. So really, I'm just kind of mourning the loss of, the end of an era, a simple, easy to understand interface to use in broadcast and to be able to make phone calls. The conferencing was really easy and it didn't involve Teams, which is what Skype is becoming. But I don't think anyone's going to be directly messed with unless there's some sort of broadcast use case that I'm not thinking of. But still, it's worth noting.
Nigel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I haven't used Skype for a long time. In fact, I'm mostly dealing a lot with Google Meet at the moment, which is, I find, a terrible product. What I think is interesting about Skype is that sometimes large corporations, companies buy companies like Microsoft bought Skype. And in the reality is it's not good for the users of Skype. In this case, it's good for Microsoft, who needed IP, needed technology, absorbed it, and then it's disappeared, I guess, somewhere into Teams. So sometimes people look at these things where, Skype, great, it will be supported by Microsoft. Invariably, those products disappear and get sucked into the mothership, and that's finally what's happened here, I suspect.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, I still use Skype, and I am going to miss it because of its limited layer of interface and complexity. It's easy. You can just have a contacts list, and it's easy for people who are not very technically savvy to be able to use. You set up their contact list, you set up your Skype name, you just let it run in the background. Then when somebody wants to call you, one of your friends or relatives wants to call you, they just click on the call, and it launches their camera, it puts them on, and it rings a tone. That dreaded Skype tone that comes through your computer, knowing that your relatives are calling you. I'm going to miss that. Teams is more complex, and it's really designed for corporate communications where you're setting up meetings and sharing screens and sending files and receiving files. It's much more complex. The security is much higher. And I don't think it's going to be an easy transition for any of my relatives that I'm now talking to in distant states. Over Skype, where it's easy enough just to click on their name and hit the video call button, and I don't have to worry about anything else. I'll have to transition to Teams, and I dread it, and I don't know if they have anything that's quite that easy to set up without, requiring a Microsoft ID and two-factor authentication and all that stuff just to sign on and call somebody.
Next question.
Next one's from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida, USA. Do you feel that the SM7DB has a lower noise floor than the original? Link provided.
Jason, what do you think?
I'm going to go with the most used answer here. It just depends. And the reason that it depends is the quality of the preamp that the SM7B original is plugged into. If you give it an extremely high-end quality preamp that exceeds the quality of the built-in preamp for the SM7DB, then it's going to perform, better. If not, then it will perform worse.
I agree with Jason. I think this is one of those things, if you just bought an old SM7 and throw something like a Cloud Lifter or what's the one from Triton Audio? I can't remember. There was a couple of companies that had those little signal improvers that did add more noise to things. You would expect that in designing the SM7DB with higher gain output, they kind of built that little Cloud Lifter function right into the microphone, that their engineers would have engineered that to be as good as possible. But I agree with Jason that if you're working with a higher-end preamp from a dynamic mic, you can probably get the same or even possibly better results because you're spending more money to do the basic job of taking a very small microphone signal and amplifying it without noise, which costs money and infrastructure to accomplish. Next question.
This one's from me, Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado. Where do I go to make custom URLs? Am I just buying domain names, or is there more to it?
Oh, Jason Bache is going to walk you through some of this. Jason?
Well, there's more to it if you want there to be more to it. You can go to a commercial link shortener like bit.ly, bit.ly, and you can use their links, their shortened links to no end. understand that there is a fair bit of kind of tomfoolery, and they are monetizing those links as best they possibly can. You can also buy your own, shortened links. A long time ago, I bought nerds.link for my shortened URLs, and I found it to be very handy over the years. If you don't have a commercial link shortener that you are plugging that specific, short code domain name into, then there is a little bit of wet wiring, but it can be accomplished very simply by Synology NAS. That's a very common way to do this. If you don't want to be paying for it, which with Bitly you're basically always going to be paying unless you want to use their URL. The outlook isn't good. Basically, if you're not paying for a service, you are the product.
Absolutely. Courtney, you wanted to weigh in on this?
Oh, yeah, there's two things to take note of here. There's the registration of the domain name registration, which happens through a number of Hover and a lot of the other services that are available to register a domain. So the first thing you have to do is see if that domain's available, register it. And then, even though it's registered, it's just parked somewhere and it doesn't go anywhere until you host it somewhere. A lot of the registration companies offer hosting so that they will set it up and give you an email address so that you can receive email at that domain name, or set up a web page at that domain name, or even better, if you already have a website, you can set up a redirect from that host to redirect all traffic to that that new URL to your existing URL. And that's the cheapest way to if you host on one particular site and then just get enough services to redirect all traffic from your new URL to your existing URL. Because the URL has to be set up with the DNS system, which propagates that name. Once it's hosted, it propagates that name to redirect all access to that particular URL to your IP address that that is at the hosting company of that particular URL for you. So that has to propagate out through the DNS system. But until you do that, it's just parked somewhere and will just give you that website does not exist, or a 404 error until you host it somewhere.
Hey, if you feel like you're getting value out of what we do here, there are a few ways you can help. You can like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can donate if you'd like to at officehours.global/donate. We're a 501c3. Or you can volunteer at officehours.global/volunteer and become part of the team. You'll meet some incredibly good people. And boy, you will learn a ton, because we have one of, I think, the technologically most forward created shows that is live on the internet. And the ability to get into the back end and learn about how this new digital distribution plumbing works globally is, I think, incredibly valuable. So those are some options for you. Let's go on to our next question.
Coming in through the QR code, Reina Doppelpopulos in Situate is asking, the 80s were a golden age of superscience. Star Wars, SDI, Dolly, Furby, etc. If you could clone anyone from history or media to learn from them as they grow up, who would it be, and what would you hope to learn from them?
Nigel's going to start us off. Nigel, who do you want to meet?
Well, first of all, I had to search for what a Furby was. I have to say that one had missed me by. Be careful on your search, by the way, with that one.
Oh.
It can go wrong pretty quickly. I probably told this story before. I was in a committee with the late Douglas Adams, and the last time I saw him was 1995, before I came to live in America. And we talked about what would become the internet and what would become communities. And it was a fascinating conversation. And I thought he was completely mad about certain things, all of which seemed to have come true. And I would love to see his reaction to the virtual world and the communities that we live in, and how that, how he would respond to where that all ended up. And I note, by the way, with interest, I watched an interview with Elon Musk the other day. And he talked about, when he first read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, what he didn't know was a philosophy book, which I'd never really thought about it this way before, because to him, the whole point of deep thought, if you know the story, is it's not about the answer, it's about the question. And that's how he approaches his life. So I'm glad to see, Douglas is still affecting people every day.
Courtney Gooden, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll stand in for Alex here, who has had to go. But James Burke, from Connections, brilliant mind. I've worked with him once on something on the brain. Brilliant thinker, and he would be amazing to grow up with and watch him evolve, and through his studies of history and relationships between different events in history, which requires an immense amount of research. To pull off shows like Connections, and that would be certainly very interesting to sit alongside him and see how he creates those connections that he did in that series for its original run back in the 70s, I think it was.
This is fascinating because this morning I was lying in bed kind of just doing my normal survey of things that might be interesting. And in one of my feeds came in a little clip from Fareed Zakaria, who was interviewing Neil deGrasse Tyson. And Fareed asked Neil deGrasse Tyson this very question: if out of anybody in the world, who would you want to hang with for a while, have dinner with or whatever? His answer, Isaac Newton. He talked about Isaac Newton's career, the theory of gravity, all the other theories he came up with, elliptical orbits and things like that, and how, in order to figure that out, when somebody asked him a question about that, he had to invent differential calculus and a few other things. And he said, of anybody that I would ever imagine, that would be the person, that's probably the smartest person he felt that has ever lived and would have more information and was more forward-looking than anybody else who's ever existed. So I thought that was a fascinating morning bit of info. Next question.
Tim Snyder in Louisville, Kentucky. I utilize Blackmagic Design optical fiber converters with 3G BMD SFPs. Randomly, they stop working. Recently, during setup, the converters worked on both ends. Next day didn't work. Thoughts as to why this could or would happen? Better solutions than these?
No one has answered. So why optical fiber converters? This may be, Courtney's going to give it a shot. Courtney?
Well, I'm definitely not an expert on this, although I have just sunk my toes fairly deeply into the pond here by changing over to fiber optic connection for my internet connections here, and have AT&T fiber, gigabit fiber installed. And for about the first, 3 or 4 months that I had it installed, it worked great. I had huge up and, symmetrical gigabit up and down speeds. And then suddenly I found that it would drop off or get spotty, but then it would come back and be fine. And I could not figure out what the problem was. And so I finally had a technician from AT&T come out and test the fiber lines. And it appears that the cheap fiber cable, and here it is. Here's a piece of it, which they had to cut out of my feed in, because this weeny little cable that carries this fiber line is not. They ran along the outside of the building and in and out of ports that go under the house and back out of the house. And at one of those ports, it got crimped just a little bit, and just a little crimp in the cable. And I can crimp this one because it's not ever going to be used again. Just a little crimp in the cable, and they pumped a really high output laser through it, rather than the regular laser diodes that it uses to communicate over the fiber. And you could see on this cable in one of the bins, it was just glowing red. And you could tell that the stress on the cable was causing enough of a drop in that signal level to make it iffy on the other side. So check your cables. Make sure you have good armored cable, and that the connectors are clean. That's the other thing with fiber. When you especially on anything you're going to be plugging in and unplugging, if it's not just going to stay plugged in and stay there, is you have to clean burnish the ends of the connectors sometimes, and they have to be cleaned carefully and make sure that they're dust free, because just a microscopic piece of dust on the end of that connector when you insert it can compromise your signal quality coming down that line. I don't know if that's what the problem is, or if it's some software problem in the particular Blackmagic converters themselves. But check your cable, and I bought a little optical cable checker after that incident, so that I now have one where I can check the integrity of a cable, and it can tell you what the dB loss is from one end of the cable to the other end of the cable.
Next question.
Narcisse by Faith in Accra is asking, lighting recommendations to get a good keying from Aximetry. For cameras, I have Sony BRC-X400 ×3 and Sony Z150 ×1. For tracking, I have a SeerSense DS80. Recommendation on mount for camera. I posted in greenscreen on Discord.
Jason Bache can help you out a little bit.
Okay, I'll take the lighting part of it. There are good keying comes down to one thing, two things actually. Even lighting, and I mean perfectly even lighting, which you can achieve from running scopes and having a real-time camera to actually visually make sure that that your key is even all the way around. So even keying and separation of that keying between you and between the key background and your subject, meaning you don't want any spill across the shoulders, across the hairline, anything along those lines. So best way to achieve that would be 3-point lighting, left, right, center, and then a kicker, usually coming down, across the hairline or across the shoulder to resist spill on the shoulders, and then separate and ideally. I think green light, going on to the green screen to kind of minimize spill. That's a little bit extra, and it doesn't always work, especially if this is their first time doing it. From there, it's really just a matter of using. Let's see, there is an excellent iPhone app that I am blanking on that I've used to do this in real time, reliably, and with very good results. It's not exactly the same as actually running Scopebox, but it really will work in a pinch, and it will show you the parts that may look exactly the same to you visually, but are not showing up the same shade of chroma to your camera, which is really what matters.
Yeah, everything Jason said. Also, the kind of signals that you're generating and passing along, are they simple? Are they RGB? Are they what amount of color data do they carry? Particularly, a lot of the compressed formats from the early days of DV do not have a lot of color information on them. You'll see 422 color and then 444 color, and that describes the number of bits that are available to get various levels of color. And if you don't have a lot of color fidelity in the system, it gets harder and harder to do precision things like creating that useful key out of the signal that comes in. One of the things that I used to use in terms of lighting green screens that was very helpful, there's a facility called False Color that maps different tones you can see to different levels of luminance on something. And every time I had to light a green screen behind somebody that I was shooting, I would always invoke False Color on the little monitor that I had that feature. And I had set at, I think, 80 IRE or something like that, a particular color, and I would light until I would get every single part of the area around that person to be exactly lit up in that 70 IRE thing, and that made my keying a lot easier. So there are a lot of techniques, but green screen can be iffy, and you've got a few different cameras here. You've got mostly Sony, so at least the color science is all going to be accurate, but that, and then paying attention, exactly as Jason said, to the split so that they are removed enough from the background so that you don't get a lot of spill light coming on them. Sometimes having too bright a green screen can add many times more problems than having too little. And Jason is actually showing some of the green screen things, and I think I might have shot
Bill,
that for him.
you shot that last year at NAB. So yeah, I'm like, oh, can I get to it?
Yeah, there you go. So, and we were on a professionally lit green screen with all the advantages. I think I'm shooting that on Jason's iPhone or my iPhone. I can't remember, but it's, if you get everything else right, the camera doesn't have to be as good. If you don't have everything else right, meaning an incredibly even, well-lit green screen and lighting that is separate but flattering on the person in front, it's very hard for the computer to do its work and pull the key successfully. Let's go on to the next question.
Here's one from Clive Kitchener in Souk, BC, Canada. Watched some of the Oscars last night and could not believe how bad the audio was for Queen Latifa. How does that happen? Any idea what part of the audio chain would have to break down for something like that to happen? It was really bad.
I didn't see it. Courtney, did you?
I did see it. One thing I did notice is I thought they were going back and forth between her live mic and the track. They pre-recorded. She did a song from The Wiz, and Queen Latifa was known for her rap career, but she did star in The Wiz, and she did in 2015 live NBC production of The Wiz. So she's sung that song many times in the past, and she doesn't have a lot of range, but I seem to detect either other voices coming in or her voice drifting out a little bit and being replaced by other voices. And I don't know if they had background. They did have background singers singing parts of that song as well. So I'm not sure whether it was just the mix and she's moving around on the stage with a handheld mic, and that can be problematic if you have a whole lot of video screens, which that stage was. Solid video screen. There were more video screens on that production than anything. There could have been interference with their wireless mic, and they had to dump back to the track occasionally.
Actually, I ran into that specifically on the coverage that we did from NAB last year. If I had a wireless mic and I was out doing interviews with people, and if I would get anywhere near those big wall O screens, we would lose radio signals between my mic and my IFB back and things constantly. So they are not RF friendly, and that is a difficult environment to work in. I'm not saying that's what happened here. I'm just saying that is as complex it's the Oscars. They're going to have hundreds of millions of people watch the clips out of these things. And while the budget is huge and the professional talent level is gigantic, things do happen. I mean, live is live for a reason, and trying to do things live means that stuff can happen. I didn't notice that, but I didn't notice hers. I think I watched part of her performance, but obviously if you noticed it, then something must have gone wrong. Sorry. Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas is asking, how did the professional media production of the Oscars compare to other recent award shows, e.g. Screen Actors Guild, Emmys, Golden Globes? Take us behind the scenes with a link.
I don't know if anybody knows that much about it. I mean, it was just yesterday, so I'm sure there will be a lot of breakdowns. And one of the things that the trade shows tend to do, or not trade shows, but the trade sites, it used to be the trade magazines, but they'll break down and they'll talk to the actual people who are involved in the production. And if there are major issues, for example, that last question noted there were some sound issues, some of the sound websites discuss those at length. So if you're looking for some of the professional craft websites, people will discuss those at length, and they have much more behind-the-scenes details. In fact, often they know the people who were at the board mixing or who was in charge of RF coordination or whatever it was that might have caused a problem in a big, complex show like that, and maybe they can tell you exactly what went on. But also, don't forget, Alex was mentioning tomorrow on his show, he's going to break down the graphics done. So if you're interested in the technology behind the graphics, he apparently was very impressed by the graphics that the Academy Awards did last night. So you'll get a chance to hear more of that tomorrow in the show. Next question.
This is another one from me, follow along to my last question. Any advice on using Rebrandly to make custom URLs? How does it work?
Jason, you have some experience with it?
Sure. It's largely the same as Bitly, Cindy. It is a newer company and a newer approach to this, but more or less, if you have a custom domain that you wanted to rebrand, this is, people that were changing URLs really kind of brought this into kind of mainstream, and that's what Rebrandly was trying to do, or at least capitalize on. But in short, you wherever you have your domain name parked, you give it limited scope access to that domain, and it can take a whole series of shortened links from one domain and rebrand them with that other series of shortened links. It can do more things than that, but that was its essence, at least when it was created.
Last question tonight.
This one is from John in Albuquerque, coming to us through the QR code. Does it seem like Apple is making a marketplace for immersive content with this new app coming to 2.4?
Jason Beige, you want to give us your thoughts? And then
sure. Also from Albuquerque. Yes. By that, I'm almost certain he's talking about Spatial Gallery, which is on Vision OS 2.4. And it seems to just kind of be this, this meeting place. Let me skip into this video from Andrew Edwards. And in short, it's allowing people to play around with this and to kind of show off their spatial work, in some public arena. I'm sure they're trying their mightiest to do that, and the details of which we'll see, because that beta, although I have it, is still a couple steps away.
Courtney Gooden?
Yeah, I don't think there will ever be a marketplace, or at least a very large marketplace for immersive video or AR or any of these that they've tried, or even 3D anymore. I mean, the biggest push for a new type of format for viewing was 3D, which we had, several years ago, and has repeated several times throughout history, a big push to move into 3D as an additional marketplace. And they failed every time because people don't want to be bothered with putting something on their face. Even something as simple as, some polarized glasses to view 3D on, because it's a solitary viewing experience. And so I don't think it's ever going to take off. It'll be great for niche type people, all the people that have splurged and spent the $3,500 for their Apple headsets. But until there's a large cross-platform standard for any of this stuff, it's never going to get out of the niche market.
Yeah, it's hard to say. The one thing I will say, though, is that I remember when Apple first got into the content-making stuff, they were abysmal at it. Do you remember, like, Comedians in Cars with Coffee that Apple did? I mean, they kind of took Jerry Seinfeld's idea, and I never watched one of them I thought was worth anything. I thought, man, how can they be this bad at creating content with this much talent in the office behind them? Well, you flash forward 3 or 4 years, and now Severance and all these programs are kicking it. So it may be that they are just completely happy with the slow burn. They see something off in the future, and I don't know what it is. But every time I've written them off and think they're gonna fail with this, I look back 3 or 4 years later and I go, well, obviously they understood something I didn't. I didn't think the iPods were going to make it originally, because I didn't think people would really. The MP3 players were unimpressive at the time, and that took over an industry. And then the phone, it's got no buttons. How will this work? And that took over an industry. So who knows? I'm not saying this is going to happen with 3D goggly things that you put on your face, and I don't know where it'll go, but I've learned to be careful about predicting failure. They do fail. They have things that haven't worked, but we'll see as it develops how the Vision Pro vision unfolds. I think that's it for today. Thank you all for paying attention and for watching and being a part of Office Hours. As always, we could not do this without our main 3 constituencies. First and foremost, my thanks go out to everybody whose face you saw on the broadcast today, all the panelists. Without our panelists, Alex always says, all of us together are always smarter than every one of us. And boy, that is always true in spades for our amazing panels. As smart and as talented and as experienced as everybody on our panels always is, the grouping hopefully helps you solve your problems. That's what it's designed for. To the other big constituency, those of you who are watching the show, our producers who ask your questions and therefore drive the content here every day, thank you for your questions. And to those amazing, quiet, unsung heroes, well, they're sung a little bit at the tail end as the credits go by, so pay attention to those people, because they show up every day in the back end of this and make all of this technology possible to get to you. Thank you, one and all. Our Tolok Traversal today, we've traveled 29,000 miles. That's how far you would have had to go to get these answers from the people in their locales. 47,000 kilometers, and that is 229 million bananas for scale. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
I got to say, it was pretty awesome that Conan, right at his opening speech, directly called out the crew, and his words were something like, have committed their lives, to making great art and great film that will kind of stand the test of time. It was strange that was added in as like a nod to, around the wildfires. I thought that was a strange intermingling, but it was great to hear, at the very front and center, the back end.
There were those strikes that kind of crippled Hollywood for a period of time before the fires, so I guess he's,
That's a conundrum. How much do you make it a local thing? Because obviously Hollywood is in the heart of this, and so their people, their friends, were displaced a lot. So I'm sure they felt like they had to do this. But it's also a global show, and you're right. Does a response to a fire in a locale make the headlines of a show that's being seen in Bangladesh? But interesting.